Welcome to a new episode of the Straight Wrestling Voices of the Indies podcast. I'm your host, Morbo, and as always, with me, everyone's favorite US independent wrestling fan, Sebastian.
Thank you as always for the introduction, Morbo, and welcome everyone to this week's episode of Straight Wrestling Voices of the Indies. And our guest today is an IWTV official. She's one of the faces of IWTV and independent wrestling in general, working for a lot of different independent promotions like Beyond Wrestling, Scenic City Invitational, Limitless Wrestling, and many more as a referee. Thank you for taking the time to be our guest today, and welcome, Gina Monti.
Oh, hi, everyone. Thank you for having me on.
So, Gina, for the people who don't know who you are, who is Gina Monti?
A very general question. So I have been a professional referee for about 5 years. It's been a short time, but I felt like I was able to accomplish as much as I could. I trained over at Test of Strength Wrestling, which is in East Hartford, Connecticut, under Slick Wagner Brown. And yes, I have been gracious enough to be invited to a lot of IWTV events. One of them, the Sebastian at, which was SCI of this year. So that was a really fun time. On top of just regular type wrestling shows, I also do death matches for ICW mostly. ETU has some death matches every now and then in H2O. I also run a little bit of camera work. I'm getting into some productions over at Wrestling Open, for example. Just did music there the other night. So I think that should be a pretty well-rounded answer for you, I hope.
Can you tell us what fascinates you about wrestling and how did you get into wrestling as a fan?
As a fan, I did not start watching wrestling very consistently until I was about 16 or 15, which is a little bit later than I would say other people. My father really liked it a lot. I remember I came downstairs to see him, and he was watching a segment with Randy Orton and Chris Jericho. This was when Chris Jericho made his first return at Raw, and I didn't know that like wrestling had a lot of story to it. So I think the stories was really the thing that interested me a lot. Then after I was hooked into a really good story, I started to appreciate the physicality of wrestling.
Did you always wanted to become a referee, or did you originally train to become a wrestler, and how did you become a referee in general?
So that's a good question. I used to go to a lot of independent shows in the area, and someone recommended that I possibly check out a class. So my trainer, Wagner, offered to give me a few weeks as like a trial run. He said, I think you have what it takes to be a wrestler. So I did a few classes, and I was like, oh, this hurts. I don't like it. But I still wanted to be a part of wrestling in general. I took about a month to figure out what I wanted to do. Originally, I was going to manage someone, but then they asked me to referee some practice matches, and really it just, that was really it after that. After I did a few of those, I started to actually become interested in knowing more about officiating. So I gave up on my other idea of being a manager, and it worked out pretty well so far, I'd say.
You also had matches as an active competitor for Camp Leapfrog or Test of Strength. Did you prepare differently when wrestled compared to when you were refereeing?
So I did one match over at Test of Strength, and Camp Leapfrog. I was supposed to do something that was more like a blood sport type of event, which I don't think actually happened because of travel issues. But yeah, there was some training. But I think a lot of referees, if they train at schools, typically get at least the basic training that all wrestlers get too. And of course, if you want to learn more, you can. So it was like a little bit more of like simplified wrestling training as compared to people who wrestle full time.
As you can tell from your social media, you have a background in Kung Fu. Can you tell us some more about that?
Oh, sure. So that basically started because I was doing a class. I used to do judo when I was in high school. Then I took some time off when I was getting my graduate degree. But then I wanted to go back in and the school that I went to didn't exist anymore. So a friend of mine, long story short, he taught a couple of styles. Basically, I showed up for the wrong class, and it was a kung fu class. But I thought it was such a very elegant art style with some intensity to it. So I pretty much stuck with it. I've been doing that almost 10 years. I think next year would probably be the 10-year anniversary. It's been a very great journey learning with the different people who I've took classes with and who've mentored me through that. So it's more specifically a black tiger style, which is a very strong style, hard style, for some will even call it that in martial arts. And there's some other mixes in there. So we'll have like some 5 animal styles like crane, leopard, dragon, and snake, and some little bit of mantis as well. I was learning mantis when I was in Florida, but didn't really learn much there after I moved back. Though I would still like to revisit the school again at some point. But it's a pretty mixed bag of different styles within that school.
What would you say are the similarities, but also the differences between Kung Fu and wrestling? And did things that you learned in Kung Fu help you in wrestling?
Striking and precision, I think, is definitely the biggest ones out of it. I don't know 100%, but I think TJ Crawford did either Taekwondo or karate, some type of striking art. So he's one example of someone who carried that over quite well. So I think with Kung Fu, it's more striking. Also, the visualizations of nice, elegant movements. So there is like an artistic style to it. If anything, I probably found a bit more similarities from my judo experience, because with judo, you have to take falls and throw people, which is a big basis with wrestling and lots of mat-based work. That's a good question.
As someone from New England and who is also associated with wrestling in this region, how would you describe the New England independent wrestling scene, and which promotions are the most influential ones in your opinion?
Okay, that's a good one. So when I think New England, I think of Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont. I don't necessarily think about New York and New Jersey, though, because they are neighboring states. Sometimes it's like they consider it the Northeast area. I would say that in this area, we're quite spoiled. We have many promotions within a reasonable driving distance as compared to the Southeast. For example, to get to Chattanooga from where I was living in Florida, that took about like 8 or 7 hours to drive. So many more things to see and events in between. So we have Limitless, that's in Maine. They also have another product called Let's Wrestle. I personally have not seen or done any of those events, but a lot of noteworthy people come from that as well. Beyond, of course, which had influences in starting from Ohio, then moved over to Rhode Island, and then now it's in Worcester, Massachusetts, where the festival will be held this weekend. Remarkable Wrestling is up and coming on IWTV in New York. There's Expect the Unexpected in New Jersey. ICW is kind of based in New Jersey. Hart's Ballroom, which is in Newark, New Jersey, is pretty much the base of it, though it is a global company now. I have Test of Strength that's in Connecticut. And Blitzkrieg, which is also Connecticut and Massachusetts. There are probably some others that I'm not thinking of at the moment, but I would say that those are some pretty key promotions in this area.
You're one of the most known referees in all of independent wrestling right now, in your role as an IWTV official on many different shows and for many different promotions. What does IWTV mean to you and your refereeing career, but also for you personally?
Oh, I'd like to know what your thoughts are on IWTV as well, because I feel like we'll have similar thoughts on it. So IWTV for me was mostly, I didn't really know too much about the company and what it does. I just thought it was mostly a platform to host all these events and stream them. But the more that I started to pay attention to the stories that were created with the IWTV World Championship, and now that there's a tag team championships in there. I did a little bit of work with coordinating with other IWTV officials on the T4 Summit, which was basically a 16 tag team tournament bracket to determine the first tag team champion. So that in itself was a pretty, I would say, eye-opening experience into what I would think that the creative process and the leadership in independent wrestling is like. And it really makes you value how good of a team you need in order to make an idea possible, much like this podcast here. I'm sure you have your different people who are experienced and skilled in different areas, and that's basically what I gleaned from that experience working with them. I would say that on a personal level, it's always going to be like a home base for me because there's so many people who I connected with through IWTV, not just in this area, but in the Southeast as well. Dylan Hales and Matt Griffin, of course, being big people who I would talk to a lot. Promoters, and Dylan also being a very heavy influence on just like independent wrestling in itself. And of course, everyone at IWTV who in the production team, in the administrative roles, who have also given me chances to perform and officiate great matches that were hosted on the streaming service. There's a lot of gratitude that I give to IWTV as a whole. I think that we have a lot of really great products on that streaming network, but also a good network of people as well.
You are definitely right that we are similar in terms of what IWTV means to us, and especially given this, what does it mean to you to be one of the faces of IWTV, representing IWTV, also representing the IWTV hoodie in commercials during live streams and so on?
I don't really know how that happened. I think it was just I really just love IWTV so much that I started promoting it as much as possible on Twitter. And the more exposure that you have on there with independent wrestling, the better for it. I think it's just mostly it depends on the type of show it is. I know that ETU, Expect the Unexpected, for example, there are times where I look at it as a representation of IWTV. I've done a few of those world championship matches at this point. And it's interesting because it's kind of like you're on a show. For example, we'll say like it'll be Beyond, and you're a Beyond official on that show. But when you do a IWTV tag team championship match or world championship match, then there's a different representation towards it. So it is the same job. It just kind of has like a different emphasis on it, different audiences as well, paying attention to what's going on. But as well as like just working, and seeing what's going on with the products. Even if I'm not on the shows, I still try to do what I can to support it by like watching Uncharted Territory, for example, within this past season. But it's great. Again, it just comes back down to that networking concept that I mentioned before. If I was like on a few shows at IWTV, and then when I came to the Southeast, working on Uncharted Territory Season 4, it carried pretty well because I never met Matt Griffin before I was booked for Action, but he knew who I was because I was able to display what I could do on the network. So I'd say it really carries lots of responsibility, but the payoff is absolutely great. You meet a lot of great people with it.
When we talk about refereeing and representing IWTV, we definitely have to talk about the tragic loss independent wrestling world, the wrestling world in general, has suffered this year. In March, IWTV referee Sean Patrick O'Brien, known as SBO, passed away. And as someone who worked with him, what kind of impact did SBO have on independent wrestling in general, and how big of a role did he especially play in establishing IWTV as we know today?
Oh, it's almost a year at this point. Pretty amazing that it's been that long. Still feels like he's here, which is, of course, something I could never express all the gratitude I have in the world for, to see that his spirit is still carried on and remembered so much. I think Sean was a very good mentor with the death matches, but also as just like a fellow referee and friend. He was always quite good at keeping his attitude quite calm and collected when there be frustrating things that are met during shows, and that happens, often in wrestling. Some things just don't go according to plan. You're met with difficult personalities, but that's just life. And he always took it on the chin very well, and was a very good example of someone who was very friendly and calm. If you had a problem, you could talk to him and he would just make you feel better. So I think that his, at least in my opinion, I'm sure if you talk to other people, they'll have different perspectives on what his impact to IWTV and everyone within that family is like. But to me, he was a very steadfast person who was very reliable, even if he lived in Kentucky and had to drive a long time to get to other places, he'd still be there. And we always expected him to be there. And, that I think that's kind of what made the pain of losing him like so much more with the gravity of it, because we just always thought that he'd be there. But he's still here in some ways. I think that I've lost some friends in wrestling, and just in personal life, I don't really think I've seen people come together in the way that Sean has brought us together. Even the people who didn't know who he was, and I'm sure that Sebastian probably knows this quite well, is he always took pictures with everyone and he always posted them, and that's what people remembered, that he was someone who wasn't in it for himself, but he just wanted to be a part of something. He wanted to be a part of people's lives, and he certainly was. So we miss him all the time, but I think that his memory is still honored in great ways at the Festival on Saturday. This coming week, there's going to be a 2-part show that ICW is going to hold in honorarium of him. So the SPO Tournament of the Tough Guys. I wish I could be there for that. I still wear his armband whenever I, can. He's definitely a greatly missed asset. And yeah, I'm very glad that I have met him and spent the time that I have with him. He was a fantastic mentor.
You already talked about how this brought people together, and I was there in person at the SCI when the shows started with SPO chants and wrestlers and officials, like you always had, like yourself or Landon Hale or many others. Wore the SPO armbands, and you can still see people do that. There was also a SPO tribute show this year. Would you say that this supporting and being there for each other, and especially in hard times like this, is also what makes the IWTV or like the independent wrestling universe in general special?
I'd say it is, yes. I know that like IWTV again for me is more of like the connection and the family that I have that has gone through something like this. So maybe some others might have different opinions, but even in the public sphere of social media, if someone is lost within a community, you see people come together. But to experience it in person, even that 10 bell salute that we had for him, or that moment of silence that we had for him at the beginning of SCI, we just it's nice to have something on our uniforms as referees to commemorate him by. It's also a little bit different to lose someone in the community who was a support staff person, like an official or referee. It feels, of course, a little bit more personal because, we don't really have many of us within independent wrestling who are consistently working like Sean did. So, of course, for like Shiny Shoes and we thought that suggesting and working with Matt to coordinate something in honor of him would be very important. And I think that was special, at least to just even connect with people who I probably didn't know so well, who knew Sean too. You get to meet others through that way of a mutual love for him. And I think there is something very special in terms of, again, just that memory is going to stay as long as we're refereeing and having those official armbands and just talking about them.
You already mentioned your fellow referee Shiny Shoes, and he recently said that the late great SPO was one of only a few people who officiated both ICW Notes Bart and GCW shows, and you are one of the others. Is this something you are proud of? And how was your experience working for GCW?
Oh, yeah. So GCW, I don't work for as much as I did in the past. The first GCW show I actually did was, I think in 2021. That was like the first, or 2020 rather. Um, when GCW used to be on IWTV, they used to have these double header shows with Beyond. So Brett Lauderdale asked me if I could stay to do the show, and then I did another one of those. So it's a very interesting because I haven't done the death matches, nor worked on a show that had them. Had those types of matches on the same card that I was working with, but GCW was the first of that. So even though if you don't do those matches as an official firsthand, you are at least there to kind of get some idea of like what the expectation is and talking with other referees who have done those. So the last, GCW show that I have done was when they were in Hartford in July. I mean, I would like to go back and work with them once more. Just haven't had the chance to. And of course, ICW is always home. I just sometimes can't get to those shows depending on the schedule or where they are. But yeah, I guess there is some pride to it. I don't know if I really thought about it, but I do know what you're talking about. I did see that post that he made. And those are some leading promotions that offer death matches. So there is a pride to it.
Speaking of promotions like ICW Notes, but GCW, and also, of course, H2O with 3 months deathmatch tournament you were part of. You're one of the referees who work quite a lot of shows with a hardcore and like deathmatch focus or orientation. Does it feel different refereeing such matches compared to, I put it in quotation marks, regular matches?
Yeah, there is some differences with it. I'd say that the main difference, and this is where it gets a little bit more technical, is the camera work. So as a referee, we're trying to do the best that we can to see clearly where we are in the ring in order to officiate and make the right call, but at the same time, with people, especially if it's streaming or if it's a video on demand, you want to make sure that they could see at home too. So in regular matches, you have to do the best that you can to get out of the roaming cam their way, and also the hard cam. So typically on a show, at least with a lot of IWTV operated ones, you have two roaming cameras on opposite sides of the ring, and then one that's in a straight position, usually facing into the ring. You're trying not to cross in any way, so again, that you don't get in the way of the perspective of the camera. Now, unfortunately, with death matches, especially hardcore matches, matches where there's just foreign objects typically in there, sometimes you don't have the room to get out of the way safely, be in the spots that you need to be in if you need to check on somebody or do the counts, etc., without sometimes getting in the way of the camera. So there is a different approach to it. Just because the positioning in itself is you're going to want to really make sure that you're not in the way. You're also paying attention to what things need to be put aside if they're done with them. What things need to be placed in other areas if they need it like a little bit closer, or just to like even make it fair. With glass in particular, there's a very different approach to it because you want to. It's dangerous, but you're going to do the best that you can as an official to assist the wrestlers and not making it worse. So, light tubes. Typically, when they break, sometimes you'll find some shards that are U-shaped. So, if you can, you'll probably see me stomping on the mat as well as like other referees who do death matches to basically make sure that those U-shaped shards get broken down. So that way, when wrestlers take a bump or fall on the mat, they don't have anything potentially puncturing areas. You really have to double check on absolutely everybody. I know that there was a match that Tommy Vendetta had with Colby Carino at the last ICW show I was at in the fall that had to get cut short because unfortunately Tommy got cut across the neck. Unfortunately, it wasn't very deep. but it made me a little nervous. So I said, yeah, I think we have to cut this short. And of course, just making sure that you want to, especially if you're on the outside, that the fans not get in the way of it. At Deadlock Pro, for example, there was a lot of outside work that was happening with Cruel and Colby Carino during a barbed wire match. So there's a little bit of crowd control, a lot of more moving parts in a regular match where you just have to be in the ring. And that's really all I have to worry about. There's definitely more to it, but I think that's a pretty good intro type of answer for you.
Deathmatch and hardcore shows aren't like the only special or unique shows that you work, because I recently saw you being the referee in a match between Harvey Dunkelman and Roberta Gingersnap for Red Pro Wrestling. Two wrestlers who are usually known under different names. For the listeners who haven't heard of Red Pro Wrestling before, what is special about this promotion and what was special about this match?
Yes, and please put this on the list of other shows in the Northeast that people should see. I'm very excited that Rad Pro is coming to the Restival this year as well. We have other newer faces joining the roster. So Rad Pro Wrestling is set in the 90s. So at the beginning of every show, we take a little bit of a time travel back to the 90s, where a lot of these wrestlers who you normally see, like Lil Mean Kathleen as Roberta Gingersnap, the rapping granny, and Cole Cabana coming in as RV Dunkelman, rather, a basketball player. So there's different characters that people have. One of them is Angelo Intellect, who is a robot that is programmed by Sidney Bacabella, who plays a programmer. His name escapes me at the moment, but it's a very nice act. So Angela Intellect, who's played by Channing Thomas, is like basically like a wrestler who is upgrading at every show. So he's learning things as like a wrestling robot, artificial intelligence. And for my character, I am still an official, but my name is Regina Tonatello. I am the hard-nosed referee who is the most strict. So I'll have a tape measure with me to make sure that people are doing things correctly. Though that particular match was done with granny wrestling rules, I think. So there was a basketball involved. There was a purse and I think a locker involved at one point. It's a fantastic show. I think it really is very different than what we offer on IWTV as a service. So again, this is going to be held at the Restival. There is a common roster full of people like CJ Cruz. Oh my gosh, there's just like so many. I can't remember his name, but Diane Lohem, I think, who is like a French artist who's made these human sculptures to be other wrestlers. Oh my goodness, there's just so many great characters that you have to see. And we have, again, a lot of people coming in with debuting new characters at this holiday special that we're going to be doing at the Restival. So that is on the 31st during the day. It will be streaming on IWTV as well. And I really hope that people check it out because it's really like a blast. It's a really fun time.
The way Sidney Bacabella is called Wally Dengus on Red Pro Wrestling.
Wally Dengus, yeah.
So
I
you
was surprised by the question that I was so prepared for it.
So you can already see that it's a very different promotion from what you're maybe used to. How would you describe the experience to be a referee in such an unusual environment and for such a unique promotion? Maybe also compared to being the referee at deathmatch shows or shows like SCI.
Yeah, so this show definitely is more for the entertainment value of it. It's very, sometimes it can be comedic, but sometimes you could have some very serious matches. So I'm very sorry that I don't remember people's Rad Pro Wrestling names, but Ricky Smokes and let's see, Dan Lohem in Rad Pro and CJ Cruz all had an excellent triple threat match that we had at the last show at the beginning of the month. Of course, Epi also came in as a character who was a type of conservative Christian who was wrestling Jay George, who is a type of director. So that was also really fun to just see people do different type of personalities. So yeah, you can have those comedy matches. Sometimes like I've done a few comedy matches in the past. Very, very briefly, I did work for Shakara before it closed, and there were a couple of like matches like that. But I think Rad Pro really brings up the entertainment value. However, you could have those like very extreme fun matches. The championship actually just got crowned at the last show. Rod Slab, who's Bobby Orlando, is now the champion at Rad. He had an excellent angle with Brian Malonis, who is Kingpin. It really is like, again, a great time. But I think that doing the matches there, it can be very different, but some of them, it could have like a lot of similarities between regular matches. And of course, you have regular matches on the show too. It's a good variety.
You're not only active in independent wrestling. You have also been refereeing at a Ring of Honor taping in October. How was your experience there, and what makes working for Ring of Honor different compared to working for independent promotions?
I was invited. The first time I worked for Ring of Honor, I think, was in May of this year. I was invited to go down to a taping in Orlando. And that one was very different in terms of working with like an earpiece. I'd say that really was like the biggest difference that time around. So the second time that I went in was in Hartford at the Excel Center for Ring of Honor and AEW Collision. I want to say that was in August or July, possibly September. And that time around, it was like a little bit more highlighted. So I would say like that and culminated with the last taping I was at in October doing those matches. When you're on a type of televised program like that versus independent wrestling, you have more producers who see things. So there's a lot of smaller details that I was given in terms of like feedback that on the independents would probably be fine, especially if it's not televised. So maybe having those like big reactions for the benefit of a large crowd who are just there and probably won't see the video on demand is beneficial. But if you are mostly going to be catering to an audience who's watching from home, your movements have to be slightly different. However, the rules are all the same. I know that at Ring of Honor, they try to do a code of honor at the beginning, which is having the competitors shake hands beforehand. Sometimes that goes well, sometimes it doesn't. And also, there's a different type of protocol with if someone were to get hurt, because you do have the benefit of having a doctor at ringside. Versus over at independent shows, they do have people to help out, but typically it's like a little bit different in terms of like assisting people to the back or, stopping a match if you have to. But that's pretty much the same, I would say, everywhere.
Of all the promotions we've now talked about, what are your favorite matches where you have been the referee for? And do you also have like a favorite show or kind of show? So maybe Sin City Invitational or something like Beyond American Runner, maybe a whole weekend like Festival, or maybe deathmatch shows in general, for example.
Okay. So I would say I'll answer the last question first. I really like watching West Coast. I would like to get out there at some point. But I think that their product is really great, especially if you like shows that could go a little bit longer, but have a very, very big variety of different matches to watch. I also like Prestige. I was fortunate enough to refer them a couple of times when they were on the East Coast. But I would say that the nice thing about Prestige is that they have, it is like, at least in my opinion, the way that I see it is they have this type of like umbrella brand where there's a Prestige shows, but they also have Roseland, and they also have Cascadia Cup. Cascadia Cup, I think the last one, I don't know if all of them are on YouTube for free, but you can watch them for free on YouTube. And of course, there's people like Daniel Makabe, who's from the Pacific Northwest, who is a part of it. And Cascadia Cup, I'd say, is probably my favorite one to watch as of recently, because those matches are very workhorse matches. They have a very strong technical presence in that area, so I really like watching a lot of stuff from the Pacific Northwest. I also try to keep up with New Texas on IWTV when I can. There's like a lot of really great wrestling to watch, and of course, outside of independent wrestling, like NXT is probably like one of my favorite televised programs, as well as Rampage on AEW. New Japan, their tournaments that they have there, like the G1, that's always guaranteed great matches to watch. Stardom, of course, that's a excellent product. I guess I'll stop with that and move on to my favorite matches that I did this year. This year was filled with a lot of good, surprising matches. Actually, did a list recently, but I would say that the ones that stand out in my mind, Aaron Rourke versus TJ Crawford at the last Blitzkrieg show was really good. I think it was possibly early this year or last year that I did Anthony Green versus TJ Crawford. I think like the interesting thing is like you do like these matches where you'll do someone's match like a year out, and then a year later you see them improve in ways that are just like really astounding. So I would say that those two matches really stand out for me in terms of TJ's work. I love the Jordan Oliver and Marcus Mathers series that was done at ETU. It was only two matches. The first match went for a while, and it was very engaging. But the TLC match that they had second, I'd say was a definite, like that was the best match that I think I've had last year. Jordan Oliver matches are really great to officiate. I've done him versus Alec Price and Flip Gordon over at Fight Life. Those were both excellent matches. I'll do Jordan Oliver's matches anytime. I'd say that Steve Stetson versus Alec Price was really cool to do because I usually do a lot of like the more deathmatch bleedy kind of matches, whereas that one was hardcore, but it really did have a lot of intensity. My favorite wrestling open match that I've done this year was Brad Hollister versus Desmond Cole. But I would say that my favorite match overall that I've done for IWTV was Daniel Garcia versus Wheeler Yuta. I did IWTV 100, 60 minutes. That was the only 60-minute match that I've done. I would love to do a new one. And just to cap it off, my favorite match that I've done at Futures this year was Rachel Armstrong versus Cody Madhorn versus Jay Malachi. And Bankston versus Ichiban over at Night Before. Throughout the whole tournament, I would have to say it was Timothy Thatcher and Adam Priest. That match was truly excellent. Great tournament this year, too, in general.
You spoke about the matches you did this year and at this year's Beyond American Runner on August 13th. You also played a role in the in-ring wedding of Little Bean Kathleen and Love Duck. Can you describe to our listeners what happened there and how did it feel to be a part of this?
Oh, yeah, the wedding was kind of an interesting. I just never would think that Beyond Wrestling would ever have a wedding on one of their shows, but it actually ended up being like it was really fun. So it was a flower girl for the wedding. I thought that things were going to go well. And of course, a bunch of surprises came up throughout the wedding. And it ended with Puff inviting everybody downstairs to the after party. So I wasn't there for the aftermath, but basically a lot of chaos ensued. Kathleen did not marry Doug, but instead she married Sydney Bacabella, which was absolutely surprising. So that was a very interesting part of the show. But that show, even if I wasn't able to referee on it, was really great. I think my favorite match of the year in general was Gay Best Friend versus Miracle Generation. And to have the wedding follow that was just like absolutely great. I had a really fun time being an American Rana.
Before Morbo will talk to you about what is next for you in general, I would like to talk about something special, and you already talked about it a little bit as well. In less than a week from now, you will be a part of the festival, the big wrestling festival at the end of the year that is hosted by Beyond Wrestling. and where different promotions will take part. What are your thoughts going into this? And what are the shows where you will be active as a referee?
Okay, so I did Wrestival the last 2 years. This will be the third one that they've done. I'm going to be doing a good amount of shows. It looks like this is actually bigger than the other Wrestivals that they had. I think it was only 9 shows per Wrestival. Now there's I think like 11 or 12, depending on how you count it. Actually, just 11. Sorry. So this is going to be, I think, potentially what's going to make the best Wrestival. And last year was absolutely excellent. There were so many different promotions. Prestige, of course, coming over was so special to have something from so far away on the West Coast be here and the East Coast doing it in the U.S. So it's going to be a sprint. Luckily, I have a break in between, but I think that it's going to be an excellent type of show. So next Friday, I'm going to, next Thursday. This actually just got added today. I'll be at Remarkable. Then that Friday on the 29th, I'll be there for Pizza Party Wrestling, PWF, which I'm actually the most excited about because I've never refed for that promotion before. And I'd say that I'm a loyal viewer of their product. And then Interspecies Wrestling ending that night. Fortunately, I will not be at the ETU and ICW shows that Saturday. I know that they would definitely have me. I just have other plans going on that day. But my best 2 shiny shoes because he will be there. So please watch to be at least in support of him. Then Sunday, Rad Pro is going to start off. I think it starts around like noon or so. So it is like just on the cusp of being a day show. So that's going to be the Holiday Spectacular. Please watch it. It's going to be really fun. Then we have Blitzkrieg. And then Heavy Lies a Crown, which is the big Beyond show outside of American Rana that leads and kicks us off into the new year. Heavy Lies a Crown just got added for me yesterday. So it looks like I have 7 shows I'll be doing within a 4-day span. Please watch and support. And it's really fun because you get to just see different promotions and different talent. Even though some of them will also be doing multiple shows. PWF is coming up from North Carolina, so I'd say that they will definitely be one to watch as well. It's kind of rare to have these outside promotions, of course, traveling all the way up. So that is my Wrestival overlook and forecast.
Are there still some shows or promotions you would like to work for where you haven't been before in the future?
New Texas would be fantastic. Also because I like Texas, so I like to visit there. I think that they have like a lot of great things coming out of there. West Coast, of course, would be fantastic. I like to look into Defy if possible. Dan McCabe always recommends that I do a Pacific Northwest tour, so that would be fantastic. But it would be really excellent to also continue working for Ring of Honor whenever I get the invitation to do so. So hopefully that will keep up within the next year as well.
Would refereeing on another continent, for example, as part of an excursion of one of the promotions you worked for, also be a goal for you?
I would say so. Europe, a lot of people are going to Europe, especially, Germany, having just gracious enough to always host so many great talent who I've seen go out there and just really better themselves. So, I'd say that would definitely be something I'd be interested in. Canada as well. There's a lot of really great things coming up in Canada. So I am passport ready. Thanks for expanding on that question.
Aside from these more specific goals, do you have like one or several big goals you would like to achieve during your career as a referee? And what are the biggest goals you already did achieve, in your opinion?
Well, I was able to do one 16-minute match. I would like to do another 16-minute match at some point. I never truly did an iron match where there is a count of falls. So I'd say that would be very interesting. I would say that those are really like the bucket list items I have in terms of matches because I've done, I would say, a good amount of stipulations before. But just to, again, expand my horizons elsewhere. Probably continue to try to get with Deadlock Pro when I can. They're only up in the Northeast so many times, and I tried making it down there recently. Fortunately, didn't work out, but hopefully in the future that would be fantastic. And I guess, we just keep going with the same goal of always learning and improving.
Okay, that's it. We are at the end of the interview, and as always, the stage is yours. You can plug and promote anything you want.
Okay, sure. Well, thank you so much. So I only have 2 social media accounts that are public. It's under Hardcopyfu, HARDCOPYFU, and that is on Twitter, X, and also Instagram. Those are really like the only accounts that I have, but they also show the schedules of what I try to put out monthly of where I'll be.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming on the show, Gina. This was a great interview, and we're really looking forward to see you next week at the restaurant.
Okay, thank you so much. Really appreciate you having me.
As always, thank you very much to you, Morbo. Thank you very much to you, Florian. And of course, thank you to you, Gina, for taking the time to be our guest today. As I already told you before, we are all huge fans of you, as we are all big fans of independent wrestling, of IWTV. And of course, thank you to everyone who listens to this episode, who's listened to us before, and who will listen to us in the future. And I hope you will hear us again.